As Kenya's public debt mountain continues to grow, debt repayment is also rising, reducing funds that are meant to improve service delivery to citizens, especially at county level. In an effort to understand exactly what the Kenya's national debt and its impact to the country, our very own Apollo James sat with a public policy analyst who helps us break it down.
Today we're having a conversation about national debt. And joining me today is a public policy analyst, Suzanne Silantoi. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do Kenyans really understand what national debt is?
I don't think so. I don't think Kenyans really understand national debt, and this is not their fault. I do feel like the country has not done enough, the government has not done enough to educate people about debt. And the reason that I think they should do more is because Kenyans do have a part to play in looking at national debt, because there's public participation now in every single process, which includes debt, approving national debt every year that the citizens are supposed to take part in. So it's quite difficult for Kenyans to give input to this process when they don't know much about it. So more civic education needs to be done on this issue of national debt.
What institutions fund countries and why?
We acquire loans from different places. So first we can have loans between countries. So those are called bilateral agreements. So for example, we have loans with China directly, and we've seen that in projects such as the SGR, the superhighway, Thika superhighway. Those are debts between countries directly. We also have loans that we take from multinational institutions. So this include like the IMF, the World Bank, and institutions like those. So those are the kinds of debts that we take, and those are the institutions that offer loans and countries that offer loans.
Why do countries borrow?
Why do we borrow? So we borrow for various reasons. The first reason obviously is because we have something we call a national deficit, a national budget deficit. This just basically means the amount of money that we would like to spend as a country is not enough, does not equate to the amount of money that we collect in revenue. So there's a gap in how much we want to spend and how much we have. So we borrow to fill up that gap. The second reason we borrow is just because of when we're trying to do projects that are quite expensive, that we can't afford, but they are expected to help the economy grow or to build the country in a specific way. So we borrow to cater for that. And some of these projects that we get into are like infrastructure projects, which we assume will help us make more money as a country and therefore repay back the debt. It's just like how you take a loan as an individual. Maybe you want to buy a house, can't afford to buy the house now, but you can pay it back later. But it'll help you because maybe you won't pay rent or things like those. That's exactly how borrowing works, even for the country.
Last month, over 200 Kenyans signed a petition to stop IMF from disbursing more funds to Kenyan government. What's your take on this, and why did that petition not succeed?
My personal take on signing a petition to stop institutions from lending in Kenya, I think it was a good attempt from Kenyans to show their disgruntledness with government. In fact, it puts these institutions in bad light to the rest of the world, because they look like they may be perceived to not be doing their due diligence to make sure that countries that are borrowing from them are actually using the debts properly and paying back the debts. So it may have a negative effect on these institutions visually, just how they look to the rest of the world. However, it's not effective because at the end of the day, who decides how much we borrow and where we borrow and when we borrow? It's Parliament. And so if we don't focus on putting in legislators who understand their role as legislators, and especially when it comes to debt and borrowing, then we are doing ourselves a disservice as Kenyans. So it has a positive effect, but also kind of negative because it really has no effect on the debt that we take at the end of the day.
Do you see a time when we as a country will be debt-free?
Debts and loans, especially for developing countries, are also a political issue, world political issues. And so they play some sort of role in diplomacy, how we relate with other countries. And so it's difficult to completely eliminate debt from our vocabulary, just given the geopolitics that go around with debt. However, if you get a radical president who is willing to just cut it off, it is possible and it can happen. We may suffer for a couple of years, but we'll definitely recover as an economy, because economies work around what is available, and so that it's possible and it's doable. But is it happening in the near future? Maybe not. I'm not very optimistic about that. It all depends on who's at the top, the policies that we set for ourselves as a country, and that's the only thing that will determine whether or not we'll be debt free.